Alright, back at Peppermill for vlog 55. As I said at the end of vlog 54, I've been running hot, so I'm a little bit worried about a potential downswing that I know is coming. My goal? Don't let it start today. So we jump into the 3-5 at table 1 at the Peppermill, which had a decent lineup, but a little on the tight side. The first hand comes when Under the Gun +1, who's a VIP, makes it 25, and the hijack and the cutoff both call. I complete in the small blind with ace-9 of spades. So with $100 in the pot, the flop comes 4-8-5 with 2 spades, giving me the nut flush draw. I check, expecting a bet out of the initial racer, but he doesn't make one. Instead, the hijack, a pro who likes to short stack, bets 60. The cutoff, who's an unknown, makes the call, and it's back on me. I decide on the aggressive route, despite the fact that I know if either player chooses to continue, it'll be an all-in situation. I make it 250. +1 folds immediately, and the hijack, who made the initial bet, thinks about it for a while, likely suspecting I was doing exactly what I was doing, but settles on a fold. The cutoff also thinks about it for a while, but he too folds, so we win it without a showdown. Next hand comes when we get a limp fest, and I overlimp Jack-10 offsuit from the cutoff in a 5-way pot. So with 25 in, it comes Queen Jack-10 rainbow. The hijack bets 15, and I raise to 50. It folds back around to the hijack, who snap calls. So with 125 in, I requested the turn to come a card that had a number on it. My request did not work out, as a king peels off. He thinks for a second and doesn't bet, which surprised me. I quickly check it back, suspecting that I'm beat, and the river removes all doubt because it comes a queen, now counterfeiting my 2 pair with a one-liner on board. Now there's nothing I can beat, but to my surprise, he still checks. I elect just to check it back here and not try to turn what was 2 pair into a bluff, and he shows ace-9 offsuit, which means that my decision not to bluff was a good one, and he takes it down. Next hand, we're playing 6-handed with 4 of them being OMCs, so I decide to crank up the aggression. We get an early position limp, and I'm in the cutoff with King-3 of clubs. I would not recommend this, but I decide on raising, planning to get tricky post-flop. I make it 20, and he makes the call. So we're heads up in a $40 pot to a flop of Jack-6-3 with 1 club. He checks, and this seems like a great spot to check back because I could already have the best hand here, or turn the best hand, or pick up a flush draw and semi-bluff the turn, so I elect on doing just that. I check it back, and the turn is highly above average. It comes a 3 of spades. And it gets better when he leads out into me for 25. I don't waste much time raising here. I make it 85, and he doesn't waste much time calling me. So with 210 in, the river comes a 6, giving me a full house, but not really changing anything. He checks to me, and I decide to target a jack here. I bet $145, and he goes into the tank for some time, finally ends up saying, "You've either got a monster or you've got nothing."
You either got a really big hand or nothing, so I'm going to call.
That speech is usually followed by a call, and indeed it is. He pays me off and still shows that he had ace-jack, so I take down a $500 pot with King-3. I wouldn't recommend the play, but sometimes when the game is tight, you know your opponents well. You can incorporate some late position bluffs in some spots. Later on, playing 6-handed, I opened 7-8 of hearts from the cutoff to 15. In the small blind, a guy that I know real well, an OMC type who does have some game, he makes the call. So with 30 in, the flop comes 6-6-4 with 2 hearts, giving me a gut shot, straight flush draw. He leads out for 20, which he would never do with the 6, as he would love to slow play it, as he always does to his big hands. So I decide to min-raise, making it 40, expecting him to call, thinking that I could semi-bluff him out on a number of turns or win a bigger pot if my equity is realized. So he does call, and with 110 in, the turn is the 10 of hearts, and something I didn't expect happens. He leads out for 60. Now, being a little worried about a bigger flush here, I elect to just call. So with 230 in, the river is an offsuit 8, and now he checks. Now, I will admit, I wasn't exactly sure what hand I was value targeting against this specific opponent here, who I think is usually going to either have nothing or is slow playing a monster. But I still opted for a tiny bet of $65 in case he had an overpair that might pay off, which he doesn't, leading me to believe that he hardly had anything at all, and I should have raised the turn. It's a player-specific read, but I think he's always slow playing at the hands that beat me there, and his lead out was a blocker bet. So at that point, I was probably up 500 or so, but unfortunately for me, that would not last. Oh man, that was interesting. I ended up being up about 500 at one point. Then I ended up raising from +2 with ace-10 of diamonds. Flop came ace-6-3, 2 clubs. Big blind checks. He was the only caller I got. And I bet 20 and he called. Turn came an ace. The ace of spades. He checks. I bet 50 and he ships all in for 250. This is, to quote Jeff Boski, an Asian male ages 25 through 50. I didn't know him. And he had just defended out of the big blind. So to think that he has me outkicked here is a question that I'm not sure how to answer, but I settled on calling, which at the time I was hesitant about, and for good reason. He ended up having the ace-queen, of course. I should have gotten away from that hand. And he took that one down, so gave back about half my profits in that hand, and then I was put to the test in a hand shortly after that I ended up deciding to fold after losing about 125 in it. Then I lost another hand for just a little bit of money after that, so I ended up going from up 500 to booking a win of only $36. So I'm not sure if I was right about saying a downswing would start here or not. By the way, I'm not that happy about the outcome of this day. I'm going to check back in with you though, and hopefully have a few more hands here in a couple of days. So, look for that. All right, so remember I said I was going to update you after the next time I showed up here? Well, I'm doing that. It is a Thursday, and I literally have 0 hands to report. No interesting hands. That's how good this game was. Basically, you had like 3 pros and the rest were OMCs, and the lineup was just atrocious. So I booked a $184 loss and got out of there. Sometimes that's the best play. Can't recommend it enough. If the game sucks, get up and leave. You only have so many hours in you. Don't waste them when you don't have to. I jump back into the game on Friday, and we immediately get some interesting hands. The first one comes when the hijack limps, as does the cutoff, and I'm on the button with pocket 7s. I make it 20, the big blind calls, and the limpers call as well. So with 80 in the pot, we see a flop of 9-8-3 rainbow. It checks to me, and I see little point in betting here, so I check it back. We see a turn that I rather liked. Comes a 7. The big blind then leads out for 45. The hijack and cutoff fold, so it's back over to me, and I decide to raise it to 125 in a pretty straightforward spot. He thinks about it for a minute and makes the call. So with 330 in, the river is a 3, giving me a full house. The big blind checks, and I have to think about sizing here. I settle on $175. He thinks about it for a minute and shoves all in for $410. Definitely going to be a spot where folding is next to impossible. I wasn't really sure what I was expecting to see, but given his history, I actually thought he might have the Octo Crab here, given the fact that he defended out of the big blind. So I make the call. I think that's pretty standard for the amount of money involved here. And he shows me pocket nines. So full house over full house, and we lose a big one right out of the gate. Next hand, we get a limp in the hijack, and I make it 15 from the button with ace 10, and the hijack limp calls. The flop, with $30 in the pot, comes jack 4-6 with 2 spades. He checks, and I bet 25, and he makes the call. So with 80 in, the turn is an offsuit 3. He checks, and knowing that he's never folding top pair, I decide not to double barrel here. The river comes a 10 of clubs, giving me a second pair, and he checks again. I actually debate a value bet here, but ultimately decide against it, and that was a good call because he shows pocket 4s. So back-to-back hands, back-to-back sets flopped against me. Next hand, we get a raise to 20 in the low jack, and the hijack calls, and I look down at pocket jacks in the cutoff. I raise to 75. The low jack calls, and the hijack folds. So with 170 in the pot, the flop comes ace, king, jack, rainbow. And the low jack, who is an unknown guy from the Bay Area, donk leads for $85. And I make a play that I like to make in these spots, especially on rainbow boards. I min raise it, making it 85 more, expecting him to come along with all of his aces, which he doesn't take too long with, and he does come along. So he calls, and with 340 in, the turn is the 7 of diamonds, bringing in backdoor diamonds. And then something I didn't expect happens. He bets out at me again. But I felt it was too big to be a blocker bet all the time, because he bets 200 into the pot of 340. Now, because I didn't know the player, I decided not to raise here. So I just make the call, and with 740 in, the river comes the 4 of diamonds, bringing in backdoor diamonds. Now, he only has about 400 left, and he goes ahead and bets out for 250. Now, I had already decided I was going to call here, but I had to stop and think about what exactly he was doing, because it was just really weird to me. I felt like he's going to have ace, queen of diamonds here, or even ace, jack of diamonds, though I thought that a 3-bet on the flop would make more sense if he had that hand. I still thought queen 10 was a possibility, though I think that it's less likely he would raise pre-flop with queen 10, and he could also, obviously, re-raise the flop with queen 10. So I never really had a great idea of what I expected to see here. But obviously, I'm not folding. I don't think any of you are folding here either. So I make the call. And I couldn't have been more surprised at what he did show.
You surprised? Surprised, Eddie? If I woke up tomorrow with my head sewn to the carpet, I wouldn't be more surprised than I am right now.
He showed ace-queen offsuit, which couldn't have stunned me any more, given the line that he took. Later on, I straddle for 10 after missing the blinds, and the low jack min raises to 20, likely not seeing that I straddled. I 3-bet it to 60 with ace-king. Folds back around to him, and he calls. So with 120 in, it comes ace, 7, 6, 2 hearts. Top pair, top kicker for me, and he checks. I bet out for 65, resulting in a quick call. So with 250 in, the turn is the 6 of spades, and he checks again. I fire in 4 green chips, and he does the same. So with $450 in, the river is a terrible card for me. It comes another 6. So now my kicker doesn't play, with 3 6s on board, and he checks again. Now I just have to hope that somehow he didn't have an ace, and then figure out how much I can get out of him. I decide to size way down, and I bet $50. He makes the call, and he shows ace-8 offsuit for a chop, an unlikely event if forecasted on the flop. Next hand, we get an under-the-gun limp from the same guy I referenced before. Let's call him Mr. F. He's kind of an OMC type, but he actually has some game to him. I got to give him that. He's tough. Mr. F limps, as does one other, and I have ace-king in the cutoff. I make it 25, and Mr. F limp calls. With 55 in, it comes 3, 4, 5, rainbow. And then something weird happens. He donk leads for 25. The good news for me is that I know, as I've mentioned before, that he slow plays all of his big flopped hands. So I can rule those out. It's still a question, though, is my hand any good here? Ultimately, I decide that it probably is. So I make the call here, which I think is pretty standard. So with 105 in, the turn comes an ace, and he checks. So I have a pretty clear-cut spot to bet here, obviously. He checks, and I bet about half the pot. And to my astonishment, he jams all in for 220 more. Now, I already established there's no way that he flopped a set here. So my decision is to figure out if he somehow limped in with pocket deuces here. Or, obviously, any hand with a deuce in it. It seemed possible, but I just didn't think that he would want to risk losing his action here by betting me off my hand if he did have that. I decided that I had to make this call, and the river pairs the 5, and he says that I'm good. Still, unlike I would do with VIPs or just nice guys, I decided to make him show, which he clearly didn't want to do. He ends up showing a really bizarre hand, ace 7 of spades. So he flopped a double gutter. And then he turned the ace and he jammed, which was kind of weird. Our king plays, so we take it down. This hand is a textbook example of how knowing your opponents can be the best way to win money playing poker. Only because I have played hundreds of hands against this particular player that I managed to call the flop and the turn, both while ahead, and take it down. It is 1:30 a.m. here, now on Saturday, and I am steaming after a 13-hour session in which I wasn't too far down for most of it. Two of the more weird hands I've ever played, that hand with the pocket jacks, and then the ace-king hand where I was up against the ace-7. Ended up winning both of those, but after that I hardly won anything else. I stopped vlogging thinking that maybe that was part of the problem, but it wasn't. I just had an absolutely brutal day and had a 2-pair over 2-pair cooler and a bunch of hands cracked that I don't think any of you care. So I suspected it was going to happen, a downturn for me, and it did. I just didn't think it was going to be quite as bad as it was. So, as always, I do appreciate you guys watching, even on rough days like this. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button for me if you could. Really appreciate that, and I will see you back here next time.